I helped over 75 people in my community called Addicted to Virtuous. And over time, with each person that I help, I develop and iterate my roadmap for quitting porn. This is the evolution that the roadmap went through, and this is the last version of it. Right off the bat, you can see that aesthetically it's a little bit different than previous roadmaps. I was able to identify 4 deadly sins that most people who are addicted to porn commit. Now, I made a separate video on that, but the mistake that most people make is that they think that lust is the only thing preventing them from quitting their addiction. Whereas I begin to notice that it's a little bit deeper than that. And I use myself as an example. When I was still quitting porn, I thought that lust is the only thing that I have to be aware of. And I made some progress, right? I was able to go on 30-day streaks. And usually what would happen, I would be tested with pride. Here's what would happen, right? I would go on a lengthy no-fap streak, let's say. And after some time, I began feeling like I was above all those things that I've done previously. I stopped being so vigilant about what triggers me. And my pride would go even so much that I would go on porn sites to prove myself that this stuff doesn't affect me anymore. I kid you not, I would relapse on the same exact day. And here's the combination of pride with lust, right? I'm not even talking about sloth, wrath, and overall how these deadly sins influence each other. But in your porn and lust quitting journey, be aware of these as well. Okay, let's move on to the black zone, the inner work, the day zero, the 0 step, right? Time and time again, I get proven how crucial this step is. I talk to new people that I'm trying to help all the time. And the number one bottleneck that I find is that they don't really have a big reason to quit. They know it's bad, they know they shouldn't do it, but they just don't have a strong enough reason to quit. Because let me tell you something. When you are laying in bed at night and you get the strongest urge that you ever had, there's nothing that is going to hold you back apart from a strong reason for quitting. And so I'm not naive. You're not going to think of a strong enough reason to quit on the spot, but it's something that should be a lot in your mind. You should think about it. Previously, I gave an example of what would happen to me often. I would get those urges at night. Up until I got a strong reason for quitting, for getting out of bed, going to another room, praying, processing that urge, and coming back, I would just succumb to those temptations all the time. But once I was able to clarify, make it crystal clear why I'm doing this, I find it much easier to do the stuff required to quit this addiction. So for me, my reasons are, I'm leading a movement of people. I have a community of people where I bring for free to help them quit porn. So it would be disingenuous for me to still be addicted, to still fat and teach others to do so, right? Teachers are judged more harshly, as it's said in the Bible. So that's a very big reason for me. Another reason is I want to be a good example for my children, right? I don't want my son to enter the room and notice me like masturbating to porn. That's weird. The thought of that just creeps me out. Also, how can I demand a virtuous wife if I'm not virtuous myself, right? And so it's important to think about those things. But what I can give you, what can I provide you right now is accountability. Accountability in a form of community. You see, in my free community, Addicted to Virtuous, I have people posting their relapses. And it's not to humiliate anyone. As a matter of fact, accountability and not hiding from anyone and showing yourself as a vulnerable person really helps bring that motivation out. That positive peer pressure really brings the best out of us. So while you are looking for that strong reason, like your specific reason why you can't be addicted to porn anymore, make sure to join a community like Addicted to Virtuous, where you can get accountability from almost 100 people right now. Everybody's supportive, everybody's going through a journey of their own. Now moving on to another step, which is spiritual preparation. Now it's a big problem, but a lot of people who want to quit porn usually come with all sorts of negative beliefs about themselves or even about life, such as my addiction is worse than others. Like I cannot quit. I tried for 20 years and I'm still addicted. And they don't really believe that they can do it. One of the biggest realizations I had up until this point regarding this problem is understanding this. What would faith in God mean if your life had no problems and it was perfect? Probably not much, because you wouldn't need faith. You would just see for yourself, right? But challenges, problems, obstacles are where in your way for you to strengthen your faith. People often ask, why doesn't God deliver me from porn? Well, do you expect him to do all the work? Well, of course, you can't ask for help, but you need to make the first step, right? Just like Moses stretched his arm over the sea and hit the ground with a stick, only then God parted the sea for him. Right? And so this spiritual preparation thing is all about realizing that God is right beside you, waiting for you to notice him so you can together climb out of his pit. And for you to be able to realize that he's right here, you need to have faith. You need to have faith that God will help you and that your addiction is possible to beat. And by the way, the page I printed out and hang on the door is also worth considering. Now let's move on to the red zone, the getting out of the rut phase, what I like to call it. And let's talk about sacrificing the trigger part, okay? Now, you may know that external triggers such as social media, video games, TV shows, can just straight up trigger you. You just see a provocative picture and physiology turns on and you just want to go on porn sites and masturbate, whatever, right? That's clear. By the way, you should carefully examine what makes you triggered most of the time. For me, it was several social media apps where I could not scroll without seeing provocative memes, posts, every other post. It's just hilarious for me right now to once in a while come back to these things and think about how was I so blind, right? If only I quit those things earlier, it would have saved me so much time and energy and mental health. But I'm glad that I eventually did it. But let's move on to the second reason, how these external triggers make you agitated. And it works in a kind of secretive way. So it's under the radar most of the time, but it's time to bring it to the light. So we know that physiologically, the happiness hormone, dopamine, binds to the receptor, right? If you, for example, scroll on TikTok and you see the post, to put it simply, dopamine attaches to the receptor, right? But what happens with the receptor? It becomes desensitized, meaning that in order to get the same pleasure that you got previously, then receptor binded to the hormone dopamine, next time you will need 2 or more dopamine molecules attaching to that receptor. In practicality, it works like this. For every post that you see, you'll need to scroll for 2 other posts to get the same kind of pleasure. And it's a vicious cycle. Like it just sucks you in more and more, and you get more addicted more and more. However, what happens when you close the app? Your mind doesn't recalibrate so fast, right? It still demands dopamine. And so what are the most dopamine-inducing thoughts that you can probably think of? Probably porn. And once you have those thoughts coming into your mind, it's just a matter of time when you will go on porn sites. So carefully examine how much do you use those social media apps, how much you scroll, and really ask yourself how much these apps bring value to me. Do I become a better person because I watch TikToks, right? Now, certain media apps like YouTube can be beneficial. For example, right now, if you're seeing this video, you are learning these things, right? You are educating yourself, which is important. But it's just dopamine, cheap, meaningless dopamine. Then, at least for me, these things don't have place in my life anymore. And I'm glad I beat this addiction as well. Now let's move on to the urge emergency protocol, all right? Here I have a very interesting revelation with a person that I was on a call with. It's really hard to convince Christians to do certain things if you don't base that advice on certain verses in the Bible, right? So what I've done with urge emergency protocol, I stopped telling people to become aware of the urge first, right? Identify it when you have one and leave the room, right? Nobody wants to do that, really. And part of that is the sloth that I mentioned in the beginning, but also you need someone more authoritative than me telling to do so. So in 1 Corinthians, it's said, flee from sexual immorality, right? So when I say become aware of the temptation that you have, right? And then flee from sexual immorality. You can do that in 2 ways. There's a twofold solution to that. Now, if you were at a strip club, let's take a very extreme example here. Like, you wouldn't try to fight the temptations in the strip club. You would leave that place, right? You would try to create as much distance between yourself and that place. So why aren't you doing that with your phone or your laptop? Which brings you access to all sorts of different vulgar, ungodly stuff, right? If you have a temptation, an urge, you should create as much physical distance as possible, right? And most of the time, it means just standing up and leaving the place. Now, the other way you flee is spiritual fleeing, right? We have physical fleeing, just leaving the place. Secondly, we have spiritual fleeing. And personally, what I like to do when I'm already outside the room, I like just praying, right? Or if I'm outside, I like being grateful for the things around me and for creations of God. And that's basically the urge emergency protocol. Become aware and flee from sexual immorality, where it's 2 steps to fleeing, physical and spiritual, and or mental, if you want to call that. All right, let's move on to the yellow zone, building momentum. Previously, I omitted it, but this time I brought it back. And instead of calling it a calming habit, I call it seeking God's peace. Now, let me read a quote from the Bible. It goes like this. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. It's Mark chapter 1, verse 35. Now, what are the key takeaways from this quote? Well, for me, the key takeaway is that even Jesus, the Son of God, went out of his way and sought after a quiet, solitary place to pray, to talk to God, right? For me, that signals that a true connection with God can only happen when you are not distracted by all the noises in the world, right? However, in this day and age, it's very hard to disassociate from that noise. We have our phone 24/7. We have our earphones all the time. And so what I want to invite you, people that I help, and also you watching this, is to develop a habit and just like Jesus, go and find solitary places where you can talk to God. Because how do you expect God to deliver you from porn if you don't even give him a chance to reach out to you? Like, it's just beyond me. What I like to do personally is go for a walk, as I said, right? And while I'm on the walk, I don't have my headphones in. I don't listen to no podcasts. I try to be as in tune with nature, with creations of God as possible. Sometimes I pray. Sometimes I just try to listen to the sounds around me. But I found that this kind of habit, where I just leave all the noise behind. And by the way, you can meditate, you can pray at home, you can do whatever you find useful and valuable. After doing it, I just become calmer, right? Anxiety vanishes because I learn how to only entertain one thought at a time. I'm not overstimulated by all those things. I also allow my brain to rewire. I'm also learning to be okay with being bored, right? Because we are running from boredom in this day and age. You're trying to be productive 100% of the time. But only in boredom, I found that I was able to find peace. And peace is what we wish to each other during service. May peace be with you, right? So my invitation would be to dedicate time specifically to just listen to God, nothing else. Uninterrupted conversation with God. Okay, let's move on to the green section, which is desexualization. And here I have a few quotes that I want you to know. One is from Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor from the concentration camp. And it goes like this. When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. And another quote from the Bible, Proverbs 16:27, idle hands are the devil's workshop. All right, where I'm going with this. So I have this thing called Jesus-focused purpose. What does that mean? What helped me and what I tried to help others find in their journey to quitting porn as well is finding a purpose that is so meaningful for them that no porn, no cheap pleasures satisfy them anymore. These days when I'm laying in bed, do you think I still fight lustful thoughts? No, of course not. I have my community, I have people that I help, I have my studies at a med school, I think about my progress at the gym, I have my purpose. And one key detail is that those things that I do are dedicated for Jesus Christ, right? So it comes full circle. I'm not doing this for vanity reasons. I'm not doing bodybuilding because I want to attract girls. But I do strength training, right? I'm trying to become stronger because I'm going to need that strength in the name of Jesus, right? Most people live in quiet desperation. They work a job that they hate. They hang out with people who drag them down. And it's a shame, but it doesn't have to be this way. You can rise above your situation. And once you have a purpose, you can literally go through hell with a smile. But the hardest part is finding that purpose. And for me, at least, it made it so much easier to find a purpose when I understood that meaning comes from service, right? And so I thought, how could I help others? How could I serve others? And the first thing I did in that fashion was becoming a suicide hotline volunteer, right? I just pick up the phone and talk to people of different walks of life, right? And so after my shifts, let's say my shift ends at 3 a.m. at night, right? And I'm losing sleep because of this, but I'm leaving the office where I volunteer with dignity, with a smile on my face. I will sleep peacefully that night. So I invite you to think about how could you serve others? And sometimes serving others means that you need to become stronger yourself. And that's where Jesus-centered self-improvement comes into play, right? Because you can't really pour from an empty cup, so you fill yourself with stuff. Right? And I'm doing this myself. Like I'm becoming stronger. I'm reading books. I'm studying. I'm practicing public speaking. Right? Before even recording this, I was just walking around in the other room, just practicing because I'm not a native speaker. So it's sometimes hard for me to find the correct words in certain scenarios. All right. And let's move on to the final thing that I wanted to say in this video, which I'll also open up with a quote, this time from Philippians chapter 4, verse 6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. I had this revelation. I had this somewhere in the back of my mind for a long time. But here's the most important takeaway from all this, right? This quote directly says that gratefulness, thanksgiving, is the antidote for stress and anxiety. Stress being one of the 3 main reasons for relapsing, for developing that porn addiction, because you use it as an escape from all the stress, from all the anxiety, overwhelm in your life. But if you can't find things to be grateful for, then you can essentially stop being so stressed. And physiologically, did you know that the part of the brain responsible for stress is also responsible for gratefulness? And they fight for the place in your mind, essentially. They cannot coexist, so it's either one or the other. And most people unwillingly choose to be stressed. But if you can find something, like for me, it's going outside and being grateful for everything, for every gift that I was given for being able to walk, for being able to breathe. Not everybody can do it, right? And some of the things we are taking for granted, by the way, if you can understand that, you can reduce a lot of that stress and anxiety. And so that's basically what I wanted to share in this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you want a brotherhood, if you want guidance and accountability for free to quit your porn and lust addiction, join the community. The link's in the description.